Welcome to the Spy Collection. Here's Anastasios and today we'll look at our fourth incident where the Chinese TKStar TK905-Mini was used by a Russian agent in the ongoing Russia-Ukrainian war. To quickly recap, in January of 2023, Ukraine's SBU detained an agent of Russia's FSB in Kropyvnytsky who was using this tracker to tag critical infrastructure facilities in the area, basically using it as a targeting beacon. In another episode, we talked about this incident from February of 2025 when Ukraine's SBU detained another FSB agent, this time in Kirovohrad. The device was placed in an escort vehicle so that Russia could track in real time the resupply routes and how Ukrainian troops get to the front line. And in our third episode involving this device, we talked about a case from January of 2026. This was also in Kropyvnytsky and used the same tracker as a targeting beacon in a local energy facility. And again, the agent had been recruited remotely by Russia's FSB. And last week, Ukraine's SBU revealed one more case that involved this device. Unsurprisingly, about someone that was working for Russia's FSB. And before we go there, just for context, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the restructure of Russia's intelligence services, the FSB was created as one of the successors of the KGB. Although its main focus is domestic matters, FSB is a massive agency, and to this day, the Russian Federation is considering all former Soviet states as so crucial for its national security that any intelligence or security matters related to them are handled by the FSB, not the Foreign Intelligence Service. And that's why FSB, even to this day, is conducting such operations in Ukraine, because Ukraine, as a former Soviet state, is part of the area of responsibility of the FSB. And that said, let's look into the incident. Ukraine's SBU announced on April 22, 2026, that they detained this Ukrainian woman in Odessa who was recruited by the FSB and was a key component in an assassination plot. According to the SBU, she had lived in Russia for the past 15 years and came to FSB's attention after she contacted the Moscow office of Viktor Medvedchuk's political project, Another Ukraine. As France 24 says about this, Another Ukraine, a disinformation platform run by an exiled Ukrainian oligarch in Russia. Viktor Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian oligarch who is close to Vladimir Putin, found refuge in Russia after leaving Ukraine, where he faces treason charges. He runs a Russian-language portal pushing Kremlin narratives on Ukraine and the war, but his latest foray into disinformation has run into its own challenges. And something along those lines is also mentioned in open sanctions. After the start of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, Viktor Medvedchuk spread Russian propaganda narratives about the war, undermining Ukrainian sovereignty. To that end, Viktor Medvedchuk founded in April 2023 a political movement called Another Ukraine. So the detained agent contacted the Moscow office of Another Ukraine, seeking legal support after being accused of theft. It's not clear when or how the FSB was notified about this, but a representative of Another Ukraine put her in contact with an FSB intelligence officer. Ukraine's SBU released this photo which, allegedly, shows the number of that FSB officer who was handling her case. The FSB officer promised that he could help her close the case, but first she had to help them with an operation in Ukraine, and more precisely in Odessa. So, on the instructions of that FSB officer, she traveled to Odessa and rented an apartment in the same building as a commander of the Special Operations Forces of Ukraine. This Ukrainian officer was going to be her target. After that, her handler instructed her to buy a car in order to have a legitimate reason to access the same parking lot that her Ukrainian target was using. She did that too, and of course all of that was paid by FSB provided money. And here comes the story of the TKStar TK905-Mini tracker. Before leaving Russia, her FSB handler gave her this tracker, likely already pre-configured for the FSB to receive its beacon. And now after getting the car, The FSB handler messaged her with the details of the target's car, which should be in the same parking lot that she was using. That was in an undisclosed apartment building in Odessa. Here is some of that correspondence, according to Ukraine's SBU. She eventually found the Ukrainian commander's car and successfully placed the TK905-Mini tracker in his car. SBU states that the goal of the FSB was to develop his pattern of life, like his movements, schedule, typical locations and so on. Then the FSB was going to use that developed pattern of life to carry out the assassination. It's not known, but somehow Ukraine's counterintelligence, the SBU, already had that agent under surveillance and detained her immediately after she installed the GPS tracker on the Ukrainian commander's car. Specifically, SBU states that they detained her red-handed as she was heading by taxi toward the state border to flee to Russia via third countries. It's not explicitly mentioned, but most likely she was going to leave Ukraine through Moldova. And now she is facing charges of treason committed under martial law in Ukraine. And this marks the fourth confirmed case that the Chinese TKStar TK905-Mini GPS tracker is used by a nation-state actor in a modern espionage case. As we've stated again and again, no intelligence service would risk compromising sensitive spying capabilities when they can get the job done with something as low risk as this, and this case is another proof of that. Furthermore, considering it's the fourth time we've seen it used by Russia's FSB, it's an indicator that they prefer this, although we don't have the total cases of other devices being used, so our sample might be biased. Regardless though, this is another case of that commercial, off-the-shelf device being used in real-world espionage cases. And if you know more, please let us know. This case also gave us more insights into some of the tradecraft used by the FSB, like using another Ukraine as a means to spot potentially recruitable agents, to using coercion combined with ideology as a recruitment method, the development of pattern of life before moving to the execution phase of the assassination plot, or the measures taken to compartmentalize and protect their agent. For instance, this agent almost certainly had no idea why she was asked to place this tracker to that car. And if the plot was to use a car bomb, for instance, likely there was going to be a different agent placing the bomb into some dead drop, then a different agent picking them up from the dead drop and placing them on the target's car, and someone else detonating them. This way, if any of them was getting caught, it wouldn't compromise the others. And hopefully all of that gave you a better look into the hidden world of covert action, demonstrating clearly how nothing is as it seems.